Good morning and thank you for being here. Welcome. My name is Adam Block. I'm the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and finding a quorum, I call this meeting to order. This meeting of the CDA is being conducted in a hybrid manner consistent with current state regulations and is being recorded. For the record, I will call the roll. When I call your name, please say that you are present. Bill Day.
Here, present.
Lee Zelcock.
Here.
Heidi Frail. Is Heidi here?
No, Heidi said she may not be able to make it. She
Okay.
was gonna try, but she wasn't 100% sure.
Dan Goodman.
Aye.
Jeremy Halpern.
I think Dan just signed in.
Okay, great. So we'll mark Dan as present. Jeremy Halpern. Is Bob here? Have you heard from Bob Henschel at all?
No.
Okay. Adam Weisner.
Here.
Rick Putprush.
Here.
Matt Telkoff.
Present.
Mike Wilcox is here.
Mhm.
Here.
Excellent. And Baran Patel.
Yes.
Perfect. Excellent. So, welcome. Thanks all for being here. One of the items on our agenda were some minutes from the last three meetings. Those aren't quite ready yet. So, we are going to, I'll take a look at them shortly, have them edited, and then if necessary, and then we'll post them to the packet and circulate them, and then we'll go forward and vote on those at our next meeting. At our last meeting, it was entirely focused on the town's models for compliance. At the time, there were 3 models. It's now, I think, come to 2 models. I was hoping that Heidi would be here to kind of talk through some of these differences, and is Lee expecting Lee Newman to come from planning?
No.
So, I think that we looked at 3 models before, it's now really 2 models. And one is more permissive, more expansive in the geography. The other is as conservative as you can get, I think, in still achieving compliance with the MBTA Communities Act. It was a very robust discussion last week. I thought it would be helpful that we could provide some comments to the select board and to Hone. And I just wanted to review most of the comments that I had, and I wanted to just understand where the consensus was. It was interesting. And I was removed. I wasn't physically in the room. I think I heard Greg Petrini say that he was particularly interested in expanding the A1 and almost tripling the type of development. I don't know if he was referring specifically to the height or density. It seemed to me it was more about density.
I think they go hand in hand.
Right, of course. And so his comment was that he didn't see anything, even in the most permissive model, that would incentivize development, at least on the A1 side, which was an interesting comment. And then the other interesting comment that he made was 2 other comments. That the special permit process is not something that really inhibits development. That developers typically understand that you're going to get a special permit process, and if they just factor that into the time and the budget as part of the, planning process.
Adam, are these comments from the meeting we were all in together?
Yes.
Okay, so I was like,
Yeah.
wow, he said that in that meeting. I thought there was another meeting.
No, we're talking about
Okay,
Sorry, at our very last CA
oh,
meeting.
CA meeting, okay.
And I, in January, and I wanted to review this because I wanted to make sure I have the record correctly. So when we make a recommendation, if we choose to do so today, that we have the correct information. Another comment that he brought up was that he thought it made sense to preserve the A1 district as residential districts and not to include commercial in the A1 district, and to preserve the commercial activity in our downtown and in the commercial districts. And that's where we would allow mixed use, which seemed to, I thought there was consensus on that as well. And then in response to the comment about the special permit process, another attorney who represents a number of developers had mentioned that the special permit process itself can actually inhibit development because lenders see a greater appeal risk with a special permit process as opposed to a process by right. Bill, if I put you on the spot, would you are you able to comment a little bit about what you're seeing or you've seen in the lending sector?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
Have you experienced lenders or have known lenders to shy away from development as a result of the special permit process?
No, if it's understood going in.
Okay, that's helpful. So that's an interesting, anecdote to what the attorney was saying. There was also, I think, Rick, you had showed an example of a project 5 feet to show what 5 stories.
5 stories, right.
Would look like. And I thought that was helpful for people to get a sense of height. I don't think that the town is actually advocating 5 stories. I think they're advocating 4.5 on a certain section of, I think, the west side of Chestnut Street.
Well, if you recall, that was more of a downtown
Right,
example because there was commercial space on the first
first
floor.
floor, yes,
And
exactly.
then it was 4.5 or 4 floors of residential
Still
above
above.
that. By the way, discussions with the developer subsequent to our meeting.
Yes,
I won't identify the developer, but they looked at a project in one of the districts
yes.
and talking about density and height.
Yes.
The numbers didn't work. They couldn't make the economics work
It was too
for the
restrictive.
project. I asked the question, if you added another floor, would the numbers work? And he agreed, yeah, they probably would have worked because we would have been able to add X number of units.
Right,
So the economics then would
Right,
work.
exactly.
So to me, that was a pretty good testament to the idea that with land prices and prices of materials and construction, that density is king. In order to make the project viable, you have to be able to get a certain number of units.
it's totally understandable and consistent with what we've been, with what we've been hearing.
And the restriction has been height that has not allowed the density on a certain land, piece of land.
So that's why I think the town is looking at these 2 models, so that the base model would achieve compliance and it would potentially produce up to around just under 1,800 units, which would achieve compliance and a little bit more. And then the second model would be far more permissive with greater heights and greater units per acre and more expansive districts or district and geography. With the goal that it would produce significantly more, and it'll be more marketable or more of an incentive for developers to actually, for the numbers that pencil out and to actually commit to a project and to develop. I do think that I'm not sure what's gonna happen at town meeting. Obviously, you know, Milton got into a trouble, and other municipalities have had a challenge too. I hope that doesn't happen here. I would expect that we'll at least pass the first compliance model, and then an add-on model. I hope as the planning board will become the proponent of the zoning bylaw change for October later this year, for town meeting then. But we don't know what's gonna happen. And even if town meeting adopts both measures, housing and mixed use and a review of our commercial districts are definitely gonna come up. And I think it's gonna, create an opportunity for the CEA to weigh in on more of these kinds of issues. Like I remember when we were doing a review over the last several years of the Chestnut Street business district, and also the two districts in the downtown when we did that walking tour. We were contemplating uses and dimensional regulations and so on. And I think now there's more of an appetite to reform the zoning, to make it a bit more permissive. I don't think that they're looking at expanding in the second model on Great Plain Avenue, for instance, to Warren or Pickering, or down as far as Linden, where the post office is on the west side of Great Plain. But that's an example of there may be an opportunity for the CEA to provide some insight and guidance for the planning board, because I think over the next 3 years or more, the planning board is going to be dealing with a number of these housing questions and zoning considerations for the next foreseeable future.
Adam, if I might add something here, I think a lot of people who come to these meetings aren't necessarily embedded in the details of zoning, and
Yes,
I think visual. I think people are much more visual, and I know we had talked about the possibility of getting renderings of what
right,
4-story or 5-story buildings might look like in the areas that we're talking about. And I think if we had a rendering where people could see this is present,
now,
this is
right.
what it might look like with these particular zoning changes. I don't know if there's money in whatever budget to do that. But I think people are afraid of for example, using Great Plain as an example, driving down some monolithic
Yes.
tunnel when it really wouldn't appear that way. But I think they need a visual to be able to come to terms with that.
I think that's a very good point. And because I have an opportunity to sit on both this and the planning board, I'll raise that. You can also raise that with Alex and me, so that when we get to town meeting.
Adam, I think, and Rich, we tried that a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, up on Gould Street. We were,
Right, for Muzzy.
yeah, well, no, the other side of the track, increasing the height of the buildings around the field, baseball field up there. And we had some renderings done. We started out just a descriptive kind of what the new zoning would be like, and then we added some drawings. And I'm not sure how the public took those. It didn't work out as planned.
I think that's a very interesting point, Phil. I think that had occurred actually prior to my arrival. Deborah was looking at like highway commercial, and there were 3 districts.
Exactly.
And that was north of the tracks. And and it was closer to a residential district. And I think there was a significant amount of opposition for that, which is why Highway Commercial 1 was just focused on the boundary up to the tracks and not over the tracks. So, renderings can be a blessing and a curse. And I still think it is a good impactful tool. And I know that it was very important when I got involved into the Highway Commercial 1 zoning, to have additional renderings, and that was what the town had engaged Natasha Spada, an architect, to do some additional drawings. Mark Lusing, I think, did some drawings before, I think by hand.
I think Natasha's on the,
And then from that, I asked her to join the planning board,
Right,
because she
right.
clearly had some really good, strong planning instincts, and was able to see not a piece of land in isolation, but in context of the commercial spine of the town and so on. So, and she obviously has a very strong creative ability to be able to produce these renderings. So, so I'll bring that up to the planning board, because I think those types of things might be helpful.
I watched the select board last night, streamed it, and
Yes.
they had, Heidi was there, and she was presenting she was doing a committee report from home, and she was presenting, she did a quick overview of her two plans.
Yes,
And one is, just like you said, just compliant, and the other one is called the neighborhood buildup plan, I think.
yeah,
And I think it would really behoove us to have her come in before we write I'm so impressed with the thought process and how much digging she did, and I think that she'd have a lot to share with us, and I think we should be behind it. I think we should come out as a statement and say which we think will be better for economic development in our town, for sure.
I agree, that's a very good point. She's a member of the CEA.
She just,
Oh, she's just not here today.
she's just on vacation.
Oh,
She's out of town, so.
She was there last night, and she was zooming from
Yeah.
somewhere. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I
So-
just think we should wait for her and before are we trying to craft a letter today, or just agreeing that we're
So
going to
I
craft?
think Hone actually, meets before, I think they meet on the 29th or the 30th.
Community meeting on the 28th.
There's a community meeting.
There's no more committee meetings between now and the community meeting.
So in the community meeting, this is Peter, for the record, Peter O'Brien from the Needham Observer. Peter O'Neill, not O'Brien. I grew up with Peter O'Brien. So Peter, you were saying,
There's no more of their meetings until the community meeting, the public community meeting at Powers Hall at the end of 20.
right, okay.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Yes, Jake,
Sorry.
thank you.
Thank you. Two things. I would agree with, I think visuals are actually a really good suggestion. As I, with my team, build a lot of e-commerce platforms and what the future state of them will look like when you're shopping online. And I think that they're definitely like a powerful tool to kind of bring a vision to life of what you're accomplishing. And then obviously like stating the economic benefits of us doing this is a great thing, but I think the other powerful tool is also stating the downsides if we don't do it, right? What does that actually mean in the long term as well? And that can be also just as powerful.
That's a helpful message.
she's absolutely right. It's not just about the economics. It's about solving a housing problem that we have for empty nesters and younger people who would like to live in Needham.
Yeah. And particularly workers for some of the companies in the
Right.
area.
Right?
This is helpful. I had started to draft, JP and I had started to draft out a letter. I did not have a chance to include the recommendations because I wanted us to talk today about what some of those recommendations might be. But I think before we go to those recommendations, I think it'll be helpful to identify some very specific economic benefits and what some of the downsides are if we don't do this? Kate, that's a really interesting perspective. So in terms of the economic development benefits, some that I can think of are, and this is really open, so please, put your hand up and speak up, but I think increased density helps our retail business and including restaurants. The more people we have in an area, the greater the benefit to the stores.
The reason that is because those small local retail stores and restaurants require foot traffic
Right.
in order to survive, especially in a town like Needham where parking is so sort of spread out and people coming from outside of Needham don't understand where the parking is.
Right.
So being able to have the foot traffic necessary to go to these various establishments is, I think, is the lifeblood for their success.
So, you had made a recommendation, which we followed up on in the CEA, to have directional signs for parking. And the town produced signs, yet I don't think the signs themselves have produced the effect. So I think the town might be reconsidering some of the signs. I think that may have come up last.
It was it's in the parking study, so it's kind of, there was a big parking study done. We're in the process of getting like the app for people to be able to park, and then there's some other things of just changing the parking, because the vast majority of parking in town is only 2 hours. So it's how, if you were gonna go to a restaurant, could you even have time to go to a restaurant, or, if you have a dentist appointment? It kind of encourages you to, it encourages the spot turnover, but in the detriment of that, it also stops people from wanting to wander because there's no way to
Limit.
Right. And the signage, well, good, and it was a great step to me. Whether it's size or colors or whatever, wasn't quite as visible as it should be.
Yes, to have the desired effect. I
Right.
agree. We need better signage. And that did come up in Stan Tech's report. I'm looking to get some additional funds through the planning board to expand this study that Stan Tech did to actually update the parking bylaw for the town. Because one of the things that we saw just from looking at the center of the center, and then also in the heights, was a significant oversupply of parking. And it's also coming up because developers on the planning board look for a special permit to waive some of the parking requirements, because especially in the downtown, it doesn't exist, but it also doesn't necessarily, it's also not necessarily needed. So, economic benefit of having greater residential population is the foot traffic, which is so important to business. What are some other economic benefits that people see with increased density or mixed use?
I think you've got an overall just supply and demand thing, right? If there is more supply of housing, it theoretically reduces demand, right? And keeps costs down. But I think getting that density in places that, it's like there's a huge demand for single family houses in Needham, right? But apartments and things like that, like I know I have a lot of staff that are new out of school and, that are looking just for an apartment that would love to live in a place like Needham, but there's just nothing here. So being able to get people who can live and work in Needham, right? It's just going to bring them to shop at the local stores. It's going to bring them to local restaurants, right? And it just builds up that economy for having people be able to live here.
That's great. That's helpful. Thank you. Noted that one. Who else has one?
Additional tax revenue?
Yeah, to me, Adam, I mean, a lot of this stuff, and the reason I joined these council from the beginning is that it's just our ability to really stay and keep ahead of the rest of our competition. So as you look at other cities and towns around us, they'll be doing things to continue to modernize, to attract people, workers, like Dan said, businesses, etc. So the more availability we have, the more competitive we'll be against our neighboring towns and cities.
That's a great point too. Thank you.
I think that speaks to Kate's point. If we don't do it, Other towns will do it.
Yeah. It's the exact reason why we did way back when, 20 years ago, the whole redesign of the, at the time, industrial center. We knew Newton was gonna do something, so we should take advantage of it.
Smart. Smart. What are some additional downsides if we don't do it?
I think one of the things that popped into my head immediately was just that if we lose the retail that we have in town, I mean, that's part of what creates a great environment for living in Needham. And so it's sort of the opposite, right, of some of these economic benefits. But I think as you process, like if you were to tell someone, Cook's going to go out of business because they don't have enough workers and neither does another location, et cetera, it kind of prompts a different reaction of like, maybe I can't see the future and go with you where the future is, but if you take away the things I already have, that feels like a really big like loss to the residents and the town.
That's very important. That's helpful.
Adam, just to chime in, I mean, when you go through other towns and you see big for lease signs in downtown, it's not very welcoming from a buyer perspective, right? So the more we keep folks in town and people drive through, potentially picking Needham as a livable space, and you see a thriving downtown is much more attractive than to have signs that are for lease all over the place.
Right. That's a very good point too. Thank you very much, Brim. Anyone else with additional other economic benefits of increased housing and downsides if we don't do it?
I mean, I think another potential downside, right? If more people can't move in, if more young families can't come in, what's going to happen to our schools, right? We're making this huge investment in these schools. Are they going to, there's a lot of potential downfall if we don't have students to go to the school. And it sort of seems like that could be a spiraling thing that, you have to lay off teachers and then you can't get as good of an education, and then it drives property values down because the schools aren't as good. Keep making sure that we have a pipeline of students and
So the population doesn't age?
That's helpful. Thank you. I would not have thought of that. This is great.
Dan makes a very, very good point, because the argument you usually hear when you're adding housing is people complain that it's going to overburden the school system.
Yes, exactly.
But most apartments are single people or maybe one child.
Right.
So that's a great counter argument to the argument that you usually hear.
Right. That's right.
What's the overall enrollment? Is it pretty consistent?
I don't have the figures.
Actually, more than competing towns, there's some Newton are dropping and actually back to pandemic, pre-pandemic, almost back to
And
pre-pandemic.
I'm trying to remember if there was what the projection was, because there were certain, like, I can't remember.
300.
Elementary was stabilizing and or rising a bit, and middle school was stabilizing. I don't remember what. They've broken it down, I think, into elementary, middle school, and high school. But I don't have that, the current stats on it. We can get that though. Anyone else with additional economic benefits of more housing or economic losses if we don't produce more housing?
Is there any thought that this would better the diversity of the town in terms of gender, ethnicity, certainly age, but is the opening up of the housing part of that bigger plan?
So it's a really good point. And the answer is yes, and diversity comes up in a couple of ways. One, the theory is that there's more housing supply, to a point that someone else had raised, I think Dan raised it, that the greater the supply,
Right.
the lower it should hopefully reduce the demand, and by reducing the demand, it'll make housing more accessible to more people, which would include those that may have been historically excluded because of economic impacts in housing. So it would produce greater diversity, racial diversity, and ethnic diversity. There's also increased diversity, I think, in our retail and in our restaurants. The greater the foot traffic we have, the greater the demand for our retail, and over time, it'll produce a competitive effect for that spot. So maybe we won't have as many nail salons or hair salons or banks, and more interesting experiential driven retail would be attracted to that space.
So that's a wonderful sentence to put in the letter. Like, that's what I'm saying. I don't think we had that
Right,
point.
yeah.
Exactly, that's the whole overarching
Yeah.
plan for the MBTA Community
Yeah,
Act. So I just feel like we should probably include that in the letter.
another
From us.
one, thank you for bringing that up.
Adam,
Yes, sir.
getting back to education, you noted the public schools. Don't forget daycare.
Yes.
I know we
That's
all
right.
know.
That daycares that there's not enough daycares to satisfy the demand, and having more.
That's
Right.
lead into the public schools. It's got to be considered.
That's right. Do you have any more specific comments on that, Phil?
Nope, just want everybody to keep it in mind.
Thank you very much. You know, the whole purpose of this is really transit-oriented development. And the goal is to get more cars off the road to promote more public transit. And that's obviously another benefit too. So it reduces, it should have a traffic reducing effect if we're producing housing along the transportation spine of the town. Anyone else? This is a very good list.
Yeah, the one other thing I was thinking about was like home values in Needham, right? In order to continue promoting, right, a town that's desirable as a resident. Like, I would like my home property to continue to be strong, and I think that all of this development will help with that.
Thank you. That's true. Preservation of home values. So we have a number of benefits here and a number of economic downsides as well. Kate, thank you for getting us to think in that way. In terms of recommendations, I would think that we would want to recommend to the select board, that's who we officially report into, adoption of the home recommendations for compliance to the MBTA and for this add-on neighborhood plan. The home committee was not able to, in the constraints that they're working under, especially with the time limit they have, to be able to address certain other areas. I think there's some in the community that are, that we're concerned, for instance, that I think the Hersey station area is not going to be addressed by home. And yet I think there is an opportunity to consider a mixed use area, not to take over homes for office buildings and more retail, but there's already a neighborhood business district there. It is very small. There could be an opportunity for some additional small scale multifamily housing, which could also be a benefit to that area. do we want to make a recommendation on pursuing those or having the planning board pursue those? Any other recommendations that people can think of? So let me ask this, do we all agree, just I guess, to recommend adoption of the home recommendation for compliance and for the neighborhood plan? I'll go around. Do you agree with that, Pete?
Well, I haven't actually seen the final neighborhood plan. That's my only issue. I
Right,
have
fair
faith
enough.
in that committee entirely, but I didn't,
Okay,
I
It
don't
wasn't, I
know.
don't think it's officially like
and it's gonna
done,
be presented.
and it's gonna
I
be
guess.
presented at the,
Right.
on the,
I would want to think bigger than not, so I guess if that's what we're saying, sure, like, I don't think we need to go with just a compliant plan.
Right,
So I'm not quite sure how literal we're gonna be in what we recommend.
More is more.
Right, I'm all
Right.
about more is more, I just don't know what more is.
understood. So on that basis, would it be more prudent for us to prepare the letter after the community plan? At a subsequent CEA meeting?
I was, are members gonna be going to the,
We all should be going.
if,
I'm sure it would be a hybrid scenario. And we will also produce, and send out to this full committee what the final models are, so that way we can review and then discuss it at a future meeting and then vote our recommendation.
I would feel comfortable with that.
Okay, you raise a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Does everyone else feel the same way, that we'll review the plan, the final plan, once it's been, once it emerges at the community meeting at the end of the month? So let's resolve that we'll meet in April. And at that meeting, one of the items on the agenda will be, discussion of any recommendations by the CEA for the MBTA compliance models. Is that reasonable? Okay, so that's what we'll do. Does anyone else have any comments about, or reflections or observations about the meeting in January, or anything else that they've heard about with Hone? Okay, so I think that item is then dealt with. In terms of some updates, do you want to kick us off on some updates?
I think-
Development updates?
one of the big things that's just getting kicked off, which the select board has seen proposals from like all 4 companies that are turning them in. And then there'll be the selection and review process, is the reimagining of Great Plain. So basically, if they're gonna do lane diets, landscaping, bike lanes, kind of reimagining that whole thing to not make it so car heavily focused, which does go into the housing things, because it makes it considerably more walkable for people to, go to businesses, and as well as have maybe larger sidewalks so that people could have patios outside in the future. So that process is just kicking off. So, this board will probably have some input on that as well as time goes forward, once, the select, the agency that's picked to develop it, the company that's picked to develop the plan, as well as there'll be public meetings and that as well. So I think that's a very big and important step on it. Just Salads in the process of opening. They should be open fairly soon. The
Where's
common
that?
room that is on,
3 squares.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, thank you.
More than just salad,
yes, I was gonna say, I downloaded the app. They have like sandwiches and bowls and,
kind of a silly name.
yeah. So that's good. Yeah.
Why we-
More than just, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. There's Needham Hardware, or Needham Home and Garden is possibly opening a hardware store. So the learning experience is relocating to free up that space, and then there's been the ongoing
It sounds like
what it'll be
they
is,
it sounds like, I think the Needham Observer has reported on this.
Yeah.
An excellent story about Architrave leaving that space, which creates an opportunity for Learning Express to get on to Great Plain. And then, because the Learning Express space is part of the same building with Needham Garden, they recognize a market need that was to be left behind as a result of Harvey's closing, that they're gonna expand into more hardware, which I think is gonna be great.
I've heard that that's basically a done deal, and
Yes.
they're even consulting with the Katz brothers
Yes,
from Harvey's.
Yes,
I think I
exactly.
read that somewhere.
yeah, exactly. Needham Observer did an excellent article, and that's a
Yeah.
great way to keep us informed, so.
Yes.
Union Pharmacy should open this one.
And the Union Pharmacy is gonna open up in the former Harvey space this month, so that's great. Also, by the way, a testament to what real the benefit of having a real local news service to be able to keep the community informed of all of these activities. So you've been a great resource for the community. Any other?
I've gotten, I always call them specific vague questions, and as the real estate brokers know, there's confidentiality stuff that goes into it, so when they talk to the town, they're not exactly forthcoming, but I feel there's gonna be another restaurant going into Bertucci's. They
Great.
had asked some good questions, and that it going through the process, making sure they can obtain a liquor license, a parking waiver, things like that. So I have a feeling that'll be coming for the boards in the next couple of months.
I think I cut you off, JP. You were about to say something about the common room.
Yes, and the common room just opened.
Yes.
JP, I had a question.
Yeah,
As you drive into the park, I'm seeing work being done at the old Mighty Subs. And there's some permit or some paperwork up on the door, but I haven't had a chance to get out of my car and look at it. I don't know if they're preparing for a tenant or if they're just doing work in general. Have you heard anything about that?
I have not heard anything on that one specifically.
And nothing's come to the planning board that we haven't approved a specific plan there or have received any application. So I don't know exactly what they're doing. Maybe
Would Lee know if they came in for some sort of permitting or?
she would know a little bit before the planning board because there's often early discussions as part of a planning process. So we can look into that and you can,
Yeah,
call Lee for sure as well.
Joe may know too, if it's just a building permit, just
Yeah.
a simple building permit, it may have just,
Yeah,
if they're just maybe white boxing it, it may just be a building permit that they've obtained.
Yeah, that I was thinking that. And while I'm on the subject, it's been many years now that the old Acapulco site has been used, excuse me, for the I guess the DOT sort of prep area for the Highland Ave, Needham Street. Do we have any idea when that I think the work's going to be done by the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken. Any idea when, not that maybe we would know, but it'd be helpful to understand when that site, I know, there's leasing signs up on it and whatnot, but I'm just wondering when that site is going to be sort of returned back and, maybe have an opportunity to bring a new tenant into that area as well, since amenities are a little hard to come by inside the park, generally speaking.
nothing's come to the planning board level yet, so I'm not aware of future activity there.
I would say, I had mentioned it to Lee probably maybe a month ago, and she had said they had been approached prior to the pandemic about somebody doing a redevelopment, but it never hit planning or.
There is a rendering of a potential building on that site that includes a restaurant space and
A trapeze,
and
right?
a bank. Another bank.
Yeah.
But that, again, that's just a rendering of what might.
There was some early discussion at the planning board about, this was more than a year ago, of doing some kind of like, almost like a skydiving type
Right.
facility. But that never advanced, so, so there's nothing specific, but again, we can look into that.
I mean, it may be helpful to ask the broker or the owner to just
Yes,
come to one of our meetings. I know they were not, I'm sorry, I got congestion. They're not entirely pleased that you couldn't take a left turn into First Ave and that light and that intersection was done. They felt like they missed that whole inflow that you could get, you know, basically people going, you know, towards the highway, if you will. But anything that maybe we could do to help their issues there may be helpful to the overall, again, search for amenities within the park.
it's a very good point. What's activity like in the park, Mike?
Generally, it's been pretty consistently slow, I guess. I mean, Adam can probably chime in, but I only can, as the landlord's rep, kind of show space for the availabilities that we have. So fortunately, we're fairly well leased. But for the space that's vacant, you know, it's definitely been a slower level of activity post-pandemic than it was pre-pandemic. And a lot of tenants are still, you know, who have leases that are yet to expire, are looking at, you know, reductions and space and things like that. So it's it continues along, but it's a different world in the office market, as everybody probably reads.
Right. Adam, are you able to speak to some trends that you're seeing in the office sector in our area?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what Mike said. I mean, we have a bunch of smaller vacancies, I mean, that are getting looks and being negotiated on, but you know, the larger spaces are just extremely inactive. So like a bunch of the, like, let's say 3,000 square foot suites we have in and around that area are, you know, seeing activity, but you know, over 5,000 square feet, it's been crickets really. We have building on Wells Avenue with that size, over on Rosemary, on, you know, Highland there. So it's a lot of smaller users, which is, you know, I think what a lot of those buildings lend themselves to, but you know, there are those larger spaces that need to get filled, and it just doesn't seem like there's, you know, much activity or, you know, much desire for these, you know, call it 5,000 to 10,000 square foot tenants to really relocate within, you know, within the area there. So.
And are you finding, and this is, you know, for all, you know, for Mike, for you as well, are you finding that the activity in the 3,000 square foot space, is that coming from people, from businesses that are leaving the urban core, the urban downtown area and looking to be a little closer to the suburbs? Or is it existing businesses in the suburbs that are looking to downsize from 5,000 or 7,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet?
There have been a lot of, you know, tenants in the last, let's say 12 months that have been looking from, you know, from Boston, looking to come out here. I'd say more of the activity has just been from, you know, smaller companies that are, you know, looking to either, well, you know, flight to quality, right? Or they're expanding. Maybe they started in, you know, 1,000 square feet as a startup 2 years ago, and now they're looking to take on, you know, more space and bring people into the office. But I mean, most of those people though, or most of those businesses aren't having their full staff in, you know, 5 days a week still.
Right.
And there's a good degree of the sublease space that's available too, that like, I don't know if it's well known, but IDG put all their space over at 140 Kendrick Street on the market. It's over 100,000 square feet. I think it's, you know, from what I understand from the brokers, is if they can find an opportunity to, you know, to take some of that off of their balance sheet, you know, that's kind of the dream, I guess, when you put all of it on. But, you know, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be leaving totally. But, you know, we have Brigham and Women's in our building at 254 who've gone fully remote, and you know, they have a lease that runs to the you know, 2030 something. So it's not an issue from the landlord's point of view, but from the market point of view, that's space on the market, what we call like shadow space in some regard, because it's there, it's not being used, but it's availability that will eventually come to the market.
That's helpful. That's good information. I'm thinking through some other greater trends, and I'm surprised. I think that we were expecting a number of businesses, office-driven businesses, to relocate from the urban core out into the suburbs at one point, but it doesn't seem to be actually happening. I'm curious, Adam, where those businesses are coming from. If they're, for instance, like you're saying, flight to quality or flight to expansion. Are those businesses existing in the suburbs? Do you know? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think, you know, a ton of companies were formed in the pandemic. And, you know, maybe they weren't necessarily in office buildings yet, but they were just, you know, starting out of their basement essentially, because it was just a couple people. And now that they've gotten funding and, you know, have a product, let's say, or an actual business, they're starting to do that. I mean, additionally, there's some like law firms where we're seeing people leave, right, and go start their own practice and just take, you know, a couple thousand square feet or so.
Thank you. That's helpful. Matt, are you able to comment at all about some of your clients and what you're seeing them do with their space? Are you seeing any trends among your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it depends on the industry and the sector. It's sort of what probably has been stated here by some of the real estate folks. You know, you've got, as commented there, law firms, accounting firms, where some people have moved on and created small firms and are opening up in the suburbs. At the same point, you're seeing in the real estate world and construction world, some of the large buildings in downtowns trying to be considered as redevelopment opportunities for putting, if they can, it's expensive, but residential and or more mixed use. You're seeing a lot more of that. Bio and life science continue to be pretty strong, at least where they are, but I'm not for the real estate people here. They're probably saying I want more coming out, but they still seem to be hiring people, which is good. Yeah, I'd say I mean, obviously in downtown Boston, you're still seeing some big developments, you know, with Winthrop Square and I think Lincoln and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going on that I think they're happy about, but not enough to make it as robust as what they had before the pandemic, certainly.
Thank you. That's a helpful update.
Adam, does anybody in the town, maybe JP, track filings for tax abatement? Have you seen a spike in owners looking at sort of a revaluation?
I haven't, but I can definitely go check into that. I didn't know that was, you really can't do that in Michigan very easily, and it's not the city know about it, so I didn't even know if that was an option here. So, but I will definitely check into that.
Yeah, it's certainly a big issue in Boston where they're, you know, looking at the office valuations, and, you know, as Rick and others know who track it, I mean, sales for office buildings are going at, you know, 50% of what it was sold at, you know, maybe 5 years ago or pre-pandemic, and just in terms of its overall valuations.
Yeah, what Mike's saying, I don't know how it will impact Needham, but what Mike's saying is right. I mean, there's a lot of businesses right now that have their leases coming due soon, and or have, as Bill knows, have their loans that interest rates are going to be higher when they renegotiate. So it is going to be a complicated thing for a lot of those businesses. So you'd expect to see some of them either not survive or put significant pressure on commercial lenders and also commercial owners.
I did read in the trades that there is millions of square feet that are, you know, that are coming up, exactly to your point, Matt, that, you know, leases are coming up, and there's an issue with, you know, mortgages and so on that will have an impact. Bill, are you able to speak to that point at all? Do you have a sense of, you know, what's happening around our market?
No insight to give. I'm not involved anymore at that level of
Okay.
of detail. the bank.
Okay,
Oh, no, but well, anyway, no, the answer is no, but I do want to ask a question about back in downtown Needham with the Dorenzo property. Does anybody know what's happening? The old nursery there,
Hillcrest.
Hillcrest
So-
Nursery. Yeah, what's going on?
so they came to the planning board for a preliminary conversation about modifying the zoning to be able to produce a mixed-use development. And the planning board didn't, the planning board didn't pursue a zoning bylaw change. I think there's a bit of, I think there's a consensus to be had that there's a desire to improve the area, but it can't just be for that one site. That would actually be spot zoning in this particular instance. I can say that what I've been looking to see happen, I guess, is that there'd be more permissive zoning in the downtown and the overlay from Highland Avenue to Pickering and Warren. And there is some consensus on the planning board. It would not just be for the one site. Ultimately, his plan was looking at roughly 50 units an acre, which is the same density that that the developer at 50 Dedham Street has. Very close, 48, 47. And we looked at some plans that the planning board looked at some plans that he had drawn up, and there was quite a bit of discussion. There's also some residential concern because there are, it's so close to the residential neighborhood. But I don't think it's actually going to be, I don't think Hone is taking that on. And so I would expect that the planning board would look to subsequently modify the zoning in the area. And the part of the reason why Hone, I don't think, is taking it on is because there is a desire, I think, by many in the community to preserve the function of the special permit for mixed use. So it would allow more municipal control as opposed to doing it mixed use by right with site plan review, which would have a less municipal control. And that's one of the questions that, the board has to wrestle with. It's an opportunity for the CEA to provide some comment in a broader context, but that's what he had last come to the board with.
All right, thank you. Because that's been sitting there, wow, long time.
Yeah, that's right. He bought that property for more than a year ago and he had one set of plans, which was a greater density, which the board, I don't recall, was overly pleased with, and made some modifications to it. There was some discussion about making it solar ready. One of the board members was concerned about the solar access and the solar ability of the property. And there was significant opposition from some residents, but it never rose to the point where they were formally asking for zoning relief. And it didn't seem as though there was consensus by the board to pursue it on its own. And certainly it couldn't for that one area. And I didn't think that they would get board approval or a positive recommendation if they pursued it on their own as a citizen's petition. I don't think the planning board would have necessarily approved it. So that's the latest on that, but I do have some other updates that the planning board is pursuing in terms of some zoning changes. One is, at this town meeting, the planning board will is a proponent for an affordable housing district. This is for effectively the Linden Chambers site. And it will upzone by right up to 4 stories, and also, the number of units would be, up to, 25 units an acre, which is, it's almost twice as what the existing conditions are. There's roughly a little less than 14 units an acre on this site right now. And that would be for housing. Technically, the zoning would be based on the state definition of affordable housing with an 80% AMI. But the vast majority of residents have an AMI of roughly, they're at roughly 30% of AMI. So it really is deeply affordable housing. They have a project, that's informed the zoning that they're looking for. And the town, I think, is supportive. We hope that, as the planning board, we're the proponent, we hope that we'll get adoption at town meeting. Those buildings definitely need, are in major need of improvement. And this is a great way to do that and to serve an underserved population. Another update is we will be advancing a solar bylaw. Right now, the solar is really governed in a large scale project of 40,000 square feet or more with a zoning bylaw. And through the Climate Action Planning Committee and the Select Board, there's been a desire to make solar more permissive, or at least to set up a framework for solar in different applications. So the zoning bylaw would create a use for ground mounted small scale, which would be up to 1,500 square feet. That would be allowed up to 10 feet in your, for instance, in your backyard or your side yard. In your front yard, it would be allowed, but only by special permit through the ZBA. We're also looking at building mounted canopies that may be over the mechanicals of a flat roof type of a building, as an example, in addition to a parking canopy over a parking lot, over a parking structure, which the planning board had previously approved through a special permit process in the IDG building in that parking lot on Kendrick, right near the highway. And then the planning board also previously approved by special permit, Olin wanted to do a solar canopy over one of their parking lots. And so we've created a zoning regulatory framework to allow for these types of uses. So that's gonna be coming to town meeting for approval as well, and we expect adoption. And then there's also, I understand, a citizen's petition for a zoning bylaw change that would modify the definition of floor area ratio to include attic and basement space that's over 5 feet. And that will also come to town meeting. The planning board will hold a hearing the same way we do when it's our own zoning bylaw amendment or article for town meeting. And that will come up in April, so stay tuned for that hearing if you want to participate. And the reason why the proponent is looking to do that is to try to reduce the size of large homes that are replacing tear downs. So that's in the works as well.
So they want to include the basements in that attic.
In the calculation.
In the calculation of the FAR, so you can't build, okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
like
that
across the street from what was just built from my house, okay.
right. So yeah.
Okay.
And that, one of the questions that comes up is, you know, if an existing home is 3,400 square feet of floor area ratio space, and they finished half of a basement, and suddenly they're at 3,700 square feet or 3,800 square feet. Does that make that house a pre-existing non-conforming house and restrict private property rights? So there are some questions that will come about. I do expect, I don't know what's gonna happen with that article at town meeting. I do expect if it does not pass, that the planning board will probably take up the question of a large house review and strike up a committee and study some of the regulatory levers that could achieve a greater benefit for the town. So that's probably to come.
What is going on at Avery Square?
So right now, nothing. Part of the work that Hone is doing, which includes more permissive zoning for the underlying the Avery Square district, which would include that site and would allow, I think, 3 stories by right for independent living, not age restricted as to be compliant with the MBTA Communities Act. And then a special permit process for a greater height and more density. And I would anticipate that, you know, Welltower would want to advance a development if that zoning is passed.
To Bill's earlier point on the Dorenzo property,
Yeah,
that property has been lying dormant for years.
yes,
And there's such an opportunity there to satisfy some of the things that we're talking about.
yeah, it's right at the subway stop, the commuter rail stop.
Right, and it's a substantially large
Yeah,
building, so there's a lot of opportunity there. And have there been any discussions with the owner about advancing development of that?
so they came to the planning board on several occasions. The planning board approved a special permit for redevelopment of the site as a senior living facility. And we anticipated that that's what the developer would pursue, because that's why they spent the time and money for that particular project. There was a zoning amendment that would have enabled redevelopment based on the project they were looking for, which would have included a 4th story kind of setback. And that would have been for independent senior living. And they didn't pursue that. They disbanded whatever type of a joint venture they had and partnered with a new company, Belfor, which to produce a higher end project, but it would have had, I think, very little or no independent living. The planning board was displeased with that concept, and they didn't end up pursuing that project. And I think through the rezoning, the confluence of events with the building being dormant, the landowner wanting to make it a productive use, because it's obviously not generating revenue on the site, right? So it's a significant asset that's just lying dormant, and I think through the rezoning to come through Hone or the MBTA Communities Act, they're interested in producing independent living that's not age restricted. And if the zoning passes at town meeting in October, I would anticipate them coming up in short order with an application. and we'll see what that ends up looking like.
It's an opportunity for affordable housing it's right there. It's,
Yeah, yeah,
and, it's a shame that it hasn't. Again, probably economics are driving their decision.
yeah, I would expect so. I mean, we haven't had a conversation with them about the underlying economic conditions of the site or their business and so on, but that is typically outside of planning board's purview, but you know, there is an economic cost to that property lying dormant for sure. But it was also up to them, like they got into two different,
Right.
you know, partnerships or joint ventures and, you know, with two different proposals and two different business models. So, they had an opportunity to pursue something that the town had approved.
Have they been active, considering the changes to the zoning? Has anyone from their company been active? in
Yes, they have.
Giving their opinion on,
Yes, their attorney has participated and one of their company representatives, I think, you know, they've been looking at, the proposals that, that Hone has been, the model that Hone has been producing and is providing, you know, pretty detailed feedback, and they, provided letters and so on, which I think is helping to inform some of the work that Hone is doing, specifically to activate that site, you know, to, which, while benefits them, also achieve the goal of what this is supposed to be. So it's, so it will be a win-win for the town. If the building is redeveloped, if that site is redeveloped and we get additional housing out of it and it activates the area, it's a huge benefit. So hopefully that will happen. But I can't speak to why they didn't proceed. They did ask for an extension. They asked the planning board for an extension of their original permit months ago. The planning board granted that extension. So they have something else to come back on if, you know, if they choose to pursue more senior housing there as opposed to non-senior, non-age restricted housing. Anyone else with anything?
Any people from the castle, the new Castle Hill owners, or just that purchase went through and they've just been quiet? The trust bought that big land. Is that Castle Hill?
Yes, yeah. I don't know anything more than that. I thought that it was a trust that bought it. Will, you know, redevelop the house as a private use. And I don't know if I can't speak to anything about any kind of public use because I just am not aware of any discussions. The town, I think there was some reports that the town wanted to have conversations with the landowner. But I don't know if those conversations have happened and what the status is. But I don't think it's gonna be developed as a multi-family type subdivision or anything.
Sorry, I cut somebody off.
Someone else wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if anybody's heard of any problem with rats running down Highland Avenue out of Needham Heights Square, filtering off into the residential streets on either side of Highland, say, for a block or so. Seems to be a problem.
I spoke to a business owner about another, just generally speaking, and he mentioned to me that there has been an uptick in rodents, but it wasn't a
Part of our purview, but just kind of curious. Been heard it.
Interesting, but so that's two conversations about it in the last week, I think. So maybe it's something you could look into and check with the
Public
Department of Health and see if they're aware of that as well. Does anyone else have anything? Would someone like to make a motion to, actually, before we take a motion to adjourn, Stay tuned for emails from JP for a meeting next month. And again, the primary purpose of that meeting will probably be for another economic update with activity, and then also adoption of any kind of recommendations relating to home that we may want to make.
I'll send the presentation out too, once they present.
Excellent. And the materials.
Do we want to also, do you want to send them out for 90 minutes going forward? Would that help for others as well?
You
I
mean
know, I think-
a meeting notice as opposed, was this for 60 minutes?
It was.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, yeah.
Good suggestion.
We can always end early. So you can always beat expectations if you like.
Yeah. Exactly. I appreciate everyone's time today. This has been very informative and really very helpful. Good, active, lively discussion. Thank you for your participation. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, we have a motion by Rick and a second by Matt. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, I'll take the roll. Bill Day,
Aye.
Lees,
I.
Dan,
Aye.
Adam Meisner, are you still here? Yes, you are. Excellent. Rick,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Mike Wilcox,
Aye.
Brian, are you still here? No, he may not be. Okay, and the chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Have a great week, everybody.
You will.
Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right.
Good night, I should say good day.